Bank of America saw it before almost anyone else. Long before the headlines caught on, the bank was quietly tracking where Americans actually move their money and their lives. And that internal data leads the official census numbers by nearly a year. What it picked up should stop every Florida homeowner cold. The wave of people that built this state, that pushed prices to heights nobody thought possible, has not just slowed, it has nearly stopped. And in the places that bet everything on that wave, the people are now leaving faster than they arrive. When that happens, the towns that were built and priced for an endless stream of newcomers are the very first to feel it. In 10 specific Florida towns, the numbers from Zillow and Redfin are already showing exactly that, with prices falling faster here than almost anywhere else in the entire country. But here is the part that matters most, and the part almost nobody is saying out loud. The reason these 10 towns fall first is not the reason you have been handed. It is not that people suddenly stopped loving Florida. It is one quiet force running underneath all of it. And once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it. So stay with me, because by the time we reach the very top of this list, you are going to understand the real reason. Let us break it down. Start with the scale of what changed, because it is staggering. At the height of the boom, Florida was the single most popular state in the country to move to. According to census data, more than 310,000 people moved into the state from elsewhere in America in 2022. By 2025, that number had fallen to just over 22,000. That is a drop of more than 90% in only 3 years, and it pushed Florida from the #1 destination in the nation all the way down to number 8. The people did not all pack up and leave at once, but the flood that propped up prices slowed to a trickle, and in the towns that overbuilt for that flood, a trickle is not enough. Bank of America was among the first to flag the turn because its researchers watch where customers actually spend and bank, which reveals where people truly live months before the government ever confirms it. What that early data showed was a steady climb in vacancies across the Sun Belt and a sharp cooling in the very metros that had been filling up fastest. In other words, the bank could see the tide going out while the headlines were still calling it high. Let us start the countdown at number 10 in Jacksonville on the northeast coast. Jacksonville spent the boom years building as fast as the cranes could move, confident the newcomers would never stop coming. Now, Zillow and the forecasters at Realtor.com both point to Jacksonville giving back ground in 2026, with prices projected to slip by roughly 1.5%. That may sound small, but it marks a genuine turn after years of nothing but climbing, and a turn is how every larger decline begins. What changed is not the city itself, but the arithmetic around it. When a buyer can choose from dozens of nearly identical new homes and feels no urgency at all, that buyer waits, and waiting quietly forces every seller in the area to chase the market downward just to be noticed. Redfin shows homes here sitting longer and sellers trimming their asking price to find a buyer in a market that suddenly has more sellers than it knows what to do with. For the owner who needs to sell, that shift is quiet but merciless. The home that would have drawn 5 offers 2 years ago now draws polite silence, and every week it sits, the price expectation drifts a little lower. The real reason Jacksonville starts this list is simple. The builders kept building for a wave of arrivals that has now thinned out, and the homes are still standing there waiting for buyers who took a different exit off the highway. Number 9 is Orlando, the heart of the tourist corridor, and the shift here is sharper than the price drop alone suggests. Orlando was one of the great migration magnets of the pandemic years. but the flow has nearly stopped. Redfin's own migration tracking shows the net number of people moving into the Orlando area falling from more than 16,000 in one recent year to fewer than 1,000 the next, a near total reversal of the engine that drove this market. Zillow and Realtor.com now forecast Orlando home values easing lower into 2026. The town was packed with short-term rentals and brand-new communities, all of them built on the promise of an endless stream of visitors and movers. And when that promise softened, the math stopped working for the investors and families holding those properties. Many of them counted on the next buyer always paying more. Now the next buyer is in no hurry at all. For a town whose whole economy is built on people arriving, a slowdown in arrivals is never a small thing because it touches the rentals, the new builds, and the resale homes all at the same time. The real reason Orlando is near the front is that it was built for a crowd that is no longer showing up in the same numbers. And if you think that is unsettling, the next few towns are where the slide gets much steeper. Number 8 brings us to Deltona, in the stretch between Orlando and Daytona Beach. Deltona drew thousands of buyers during the boom who stretched to the very edge of what they could afford, many of them putting almost nothing down just to get through the door. Now Zillow and Realtor.com flag this corridor for a price decline of around 3.5% in 2026. And Redfin shows inventory climbing steadily as homes linger week after week. For owners who bought at the top with no cushion of equity, even a modest slide is enough to leave them owing more on the loan than the home would ever fetch today. And once a household is upside down like that, the smallest shock, an insurance jump, a repair, a change in hours, can turn a tight month into a missed payment. These were not careless buyers. They were optimistic ones who trusted that prices would only ever rise. And that single assumption is the thing now quietly turning against them. The real reason Deltona is on this list is that it filled up with people living right at the line, and when prices turned and costs rose at the very same time, there was simply no room left to absorb the blow. Number 7 is Tampa on the Gulf Coast. And Tampa may be the single clearest proof of this entire thesis. Redfin singled out Tampa as the biggest migration slowdown of any major metro in the country, with net arrivals falling from around 35,000 people in one year to barely 10,000 the next. That is the engine of an entire housing market losing most of its fuel in a single year. This is exactly the kind of shift Bank of America's data caught early, the moment a magnet city quietly stops pulling. Zillow and Realtor.com now forecast Tampa prices to fall by roughly 3.5% in 2026. And Redfin shows price cuts spreading across the area as the standoff between hopeful sellers and patient buyers deepens by the week. The real reason Tampa is climbing this list is that it was the poster child of the boom, the place everyone pointed to as proof the good times would never end. And when the newcomers slow this dramatically, the town built to house all of them is left with nowhere to put the homes they never came to fill. Number 6 takes us just across the bay to Clearwater and the wider St. Petersburg area. And here a second pressure joins the first. This is condominium country, and the condo market is now the softest corner of the entire state. Zillow reports that statewide condos are sitting with close to 10 months of supply, far more than a balanced market can ever absorb. And condo values have been slipping while single-family homes were still holding their ground. Part of that is the migration slowdown hitting this coast like everywhere else. But part of it is unique to condos, where aging buildings now face rising fees and looming repair costs that frighten buyers away before they ever make an offer. Put those together, and you get a market where prices are forecast to fall by about 3.5%, and where the oldest buildings are nearly impossible to sell at any price the owner can stomach. The real reason Clearwater is on this list is that it carries both the demand problem dragging down the whole state and a wall of condos that buyers are quietly walking away from. Number 5 is Naples, down on the southwest coast, long considered one of the most desirable addresses in the whole state. And if a town like Naples is in trouble, that tells you something important about what is really happening underneath all of this. Zillow's own figures show home values in the Naples and Marco Island area falling by almost 6% over the past year, one of the steepest drops anywhere in Florida. This is a high-end market, full of second homes and comfortable retirees, the kind of place that is supposed to be immune to all of this. Yet it is being squeezed from two directions at once. The migration that fed it has cooled hard, and the cost of insuring a home on this exposed coast has climbed into territory that even wealthy buyers are no longer willing to swallow. Redfin shows a growing glut of listings here, with homes sitting on the market far longer than they used to, and sellers quietly accepting offers they would have laughed at 2 years ago. When the safest and most coveted address on the coast starts cutting prices, that is a signal the pressure is not confined to the cheap end of the market. It runs all the way to the top, and that is the real tell. When a market this insulated and this wealthy begins to slip, it means the force behind the decline is far bigger than any single neighborhood or price tier. It is structural and it is statewide. The real reason Naples is this high on the list is that desirability was never the question. The cost of holding the home finally outran the pleasure of owning it, even for the people who can most afford it. If you have followed the thread this far, you are already paying closer attention than most people who skim a headline and scroll right past. Whether you already own a home somewhere in Florida or you are quietly planning the move, the next several towns are the part you really need to hear, because this is where the slide stops being gentle and turns into the steepest declines anywhere in the entire country. Every town worth buying into and every town worth steering clear of in this state is now gathered in one place. 40 Florida towns, 20 rated to buy and 20 rated to avoid, all in a single guide called the Florida Buy and Avoid List for 2026. Instead of stitching the picture together yourself from a dozen scattered sources, it is all consolidated for you and you can reach it through the link in the description below. Number 4, Bradenton on the Gulf Coast just south of Tampa, and this is where two waves of overbuilding meet head-on. Bradenton sits inside the Northport and Sarasota region, an area Zillow data shows giving back more than 7% of its value over the past year, with Realtor.com forecasting declines, approaching 9% in the year ahead. Builders flooded this area with new single-family homes and new condo towers at the same time, all of them aimed at buyers who are simply no longer arriving in the old numbers. Redfin shows inventory here piling up while the builders cut prices and dangle incentives that the everyday seller next door cannot possibly match. So the family that bought a Bradenton home 3 years ago is now trapped, unable to sell for what they owe because the builder down the street keeps quietly undercutting them. The real reason Bradenton is near the top is that it overbuilt on both fronts at once, the houses and the condos together, and now both bills are coming due in the very same year. Number 3 is Northport, the town that gives this whole region its name, and the numbers here are genuinely brutal. Realtor.com forecasts the Northport and Sarasota and Bradenton region for a decline of nearly 9% in 2026, among the very largest projected drops of any market in the entire United States. Northport was one of the fastest building towns in the state during the boom. A sea of brand new construction sold on the simple certainty that the newcomers would keep coming forever. They did not. Redfin shows a market practically drowning in unsold inventory, where the resale homeowner is trapped competing against shiny new homes that come with thousands of dollars in builder sweeteners they cannot afford to offer. Every empty house and every fresh price cut tells the next buyer to wait a little longer, which only deepens the freeze. The real reason Northport is this close to the top is that it was a town built almost entirely on a bet about the future, and the future never arrived. But the steepest fall of all is still ahead, and the reason behind it is the one almost nobody is willing to talk about. Number 2 is Cape Coral, paired with Fort Myers, and this is the market the entire country is now watching. Realtor.com projects the Cape Coral and Fort Myers area for a price decline of 10.2% in 2026, the single largest forecast drop of any major metro in the nation, and that follows a fall of nearly the same size over the past year, according to Zillow. Cape Coral was the miracle of the boom, a town whose values jumped more than 60% in barely 2 years. That climb was never built on solid ground. It was built on the assumption that people would keep pouring in forever and pay whatever the next price happened to be. Redfin now shows a wall of unsold homes and steady, grinding price cuts, with insurance and flood costs piling onto every owner who is trying to hold on for better days. For many of them, the better days are not coming fast enough. Some bought near the very top, lured in by a climb that looked unstoppable, and they're now watching years of paper gains quietly unwind month after month. The real reason Cape Coral is the second steepest fall in the state is that it rose the fastest on the thinnest foundation, and anything that climbs that quickly on a promise has the furthest to come back down when the promise breaks. And that brings us to number 1, the steepest decline in the entire state, and the reason almost nobody is willing to say plainly. We are heading just up the coast to Punta Gorda. Zillow's data shows home values in Punta Gorda falling by nearly 12% over the past year, the largest drop of any market in Florida and one of the largest anywhere in America. And this is where the real reason finally comes into focus. Punta Gorda is a small, older town full of retirees and people living on fixed incomes, sitting directly in the path of storm after storm. It is the epicenter of Florida's insurance crisis. Florida already carries the most expensive home insurance in the entire country, and after the storms that battered this coast, insurers paid out hundreds of thousands of claims and then answered with premiums that doubled and policies that simply vanished. In a single recent storm season, insurers across the state faced something close to 300,000 claims after 2 major hurricanes tore through, and the cost of that landed on every homeowner the very next year. This stretch of coast has absorbed more than 30 separate billion-dollar weather disasters since the start of the decade, and each one ratchets the price of simply staying just a little higher. Picture a couple who retired here 20 years ago, who paid their home off long ago and believed the hard part was finally behind them. Now the yearly cost of ensuring that paid off home rivals what a mortgage payment used to be, and there is no salary coming to cover the difference. For some of them, the only move left is to sell into a falling market and leave. That is the quiet mechanism that turns a mere slowdown in arrivals into a real and measurable exit. Here is what that does, and here is the real reason underneath all 10 of these towns. The people who built these communities are not merely choosing to stop arriving. In places like Punta Gorda, the cost of simply protecting the home is now pushing the people who already live there to sell and leave. The migration did not only slow, on this coast it reversed, because the carrying cost finally became more than the dream was ever worth. That is the real reason these 10 towns fall first. It is not that Florida lost its magic. It is that the quiet, relentless cost of insuring a home against the water turned the very towns that led the boom into the towns now leading the way down. And Zillow's data is simply the first place you can see it, written in plain black and white. So now you have seen all 10, and I want to hear from you directly. Tell me in the comments which Florida town you live in and whether you own there or you are planning to make the move. If your insurance renewal landed this year with a figure that made your stomach drop, tell me exactly what it did to you, because the real story of this market lives in those renewal letters far more than it lives in any forecast or any headline. And tell me which town or which cost you want me to dig into next, because I read every one of these and they shape what comes next. If you are the kind of person who believes the real story of this market is the one the headlines keep refusing to tell, hit the subscribe button right now, because next we are pulling back the curtain on the exact Florida towns where the insurance market is about to break, and you are going to want to know whether yours is on that list before your own renewal letter ever reaches the mailbox.